Could you be modeling your current relationships after toxic relationships from your past? Hi there, men's dating coach HarryWilmington here, founder of IntrovertDatingSuccess.com. And on today's show, I want to talk about the phenomenon that most people do, which is trying to model your current relationship based on relationships you observed in the past from your parents and or other relatives in your family that you may not be aware were actually toxic. If you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to hit the subscribe button and little bell icon to be notified when I post up new daily episodes. Also, be sure to go to the website to download my free ebook, Texting Like a Boss, as well as hitting on the tip jar tab to show your support, the links of which can be found at the website and in the description below. Let's get into it. Okay, so full disclosure, guys. As I teach you guys this stuff, I am consistently a student of the dating game, and I am always watching things and reading things that can help me to better help you figure out this whole world of dating. And so one of the shows that I've surprisingly gotten hooked on is called Married at First Sight. It is a fantastic show. If you are a guy that wants to watch what can happen when guys do the wrong things with their women, I highly recommend watching this show. And so I want to use one of the examples that I saw on the show from one of the previous seasons. I think right now they're on like season 10 or 11, but this is from like season, I want to say 2 or 3. And so what I wanted to bring to your attention is this thing that I noticed on the show. So there was a situation where a man and a woman were married, and obviously, and with this particular couple, the guy kept saying, I want to model my relationship after the one that my grandfather and grandma had because they were together for like 40 or 50 years and it was just such a great relationship, okay? So during the show, I was noticing this guy doing a lot of things to the woman that as a guy made me cringe. So he would do things like take sarcastic jabs at her, or if she would try to, say a comment about something that she thought would be a good idea, he would shoot her down and say, oh, you're kidding, that's not a thing, don't worry about that, that's a dumb thing, what is this, you're stupid, this and that, blah, blah. And then there would be times when they would get into arguments and he would say stuff that was just blatantly like disrespectful. And I'm watching this like, this guy is like nuts, like any sane guy would know not to say or do these things because these things are things that are definitely going to either hurt the woman's feelings or make her lose attraction for him. And then, of course, this is a reality show. So on these shows, you'll see the couple interact, and then they have the side segments where they interview the person by themselves, and they just kind of say, like, yeah, well, I was doing this thing, blah, blah, blah. Then we went to this dinner and whatever. So on these side interviews, he'd be saying, so they would show a scene where, like, for example, he would say something mean to her or something that was like very sarcastic in tone or nasty. And then they'd go to the side interview, and he'd be like, well, yeah, that's just the way, like, I was raised, and that's how my grandfather talked to my grandma. Like, he would say some things, he would be insulting, and he'd be like, but it was just all in good fun. It was just a joke, and like, whatever. Or he would just say some stuff, and she'd be like, okay, whatever, cool. And she would just take it. And then they were together 50 years. So because I saw that must be the best way to have a relationship. And I'm sitting there like, oh my God, this dude has no idea that the way that his grandparents interacted was not actually a positive thing. Now, and he's thinking, well, because my grandmother took it, it must be okay. And the reality is, if the grandparents, that means they got married like in the early 20s, that might have been a time where you just kind of get married and you just take whatever your husband takes because it's better to deal with that and not be alone than to stand up for yourself because as a woman back then, you didn't have a lot of rights. You weren't able to get the best jobs. You couldn't afford to take care of yourself. Where else were you going to go if you didn't like your husband's disrespect? But the point is, this guy was looking at his grandparents' relationship and saying, yes, I want to emulate that because they lasted long, and despite how he talked to her, it was still a good thing, and she accepted it. And so therefore, if I do the same exact thing to my woman in our relationship, that's gonna also be a good way for us to stay together long term. Surprise, surprise, at the end of the show, they ended up not staying together because he just got really disrespectful and she couldn't take it anymore. So unfortunately, this is not an isolated thing. There are many people, both men and women, but this show is for you guys. So there are a lot of guys out there that, unbeknownst to them, are modeling their current relationships and how they need to get into them on what they saw growing up, whether it was their parents, their aunts and uncles, their cousins, whatever. They're seeing people in their family older than them having certain kinds of relationships, and because they didn't get divorced, they're thinking, well, they didn't get divorced, therefore this is a good way to keep a relationship going. And that could be far from the truth, okay? And I'll give you a few small examples. There are a lot of people, for example, that might come from abusive households where like they saw their dad abusing their mom, but the mom stayed. Or they were eventually able to work it out to where he stopped doing that. But for the first like 5-10 years of this kid's life, you're seeing just her getting abused emotionally, physically, whatever. And now and subconsciously that sticks with you. Subconsciously that says to you, well, this was behavior that my dad did to my mom, and my mom eventually decided to stay with him and he got better. Therefore, if I do that, it's going to be no big deal. Another example, there are a lot of families whereby the men just straight up talk down and mean to the women, or they're overly sarcastic, or they're constantly interrupting them. They're not letting them finish thoughts. They're kind of pushing their wives' comments and opinions to the side and saying, whatever you're doing, I leave this family, it's no big deal. And as guys, we take this and see this and say, oh, so this is how we should be talking to women. This is how we should be reacting when they have certain things they're trying to say to us. We should always be the guy that's in charge. And part of that means being able to deflect her opinion and say that it's of no importance because I'm the guy. And then you grow up and you start dating women and you're doing the same thing, thinking that this is how women are going to want to stay with you if you're pushing your agenda, if you're saying that their stuff doesn't matter, and if you're ultimately the one making all these decisions. Another thing is that a lot of guys grow up seeing their dads be the breadwinners of the household. And like all the guy does is go to work and make money. And that is how he knows how to show affection to his family, that he cares, by going out and making money. But when he gets home, he's like, he could be isolated. He doesn't want to talk to the kids. He's kind of like just going to his room or reading a newspaper or watching TV and saying, I don't want to deal with this or whatever, because as far as he's concerned, him making money and having a house and, a roof over the head and bringing in food should already show that he cares. And a lot of guys grow up with that one, where they think, okay, all I got to do to show that I care is just work. I don't have to worry about showing affection, planning dates, showing my wife any kind of romance, or caring for even the kids even, because as far as I can know, being a man means that I'm showing I care by going out and making money every day, okay? And these are all bad things, okay? These are all bad, toxic things that, unfortunately, if you grew up in it, you might be oblivious to the fact that the women you're dating aren't actually being accepting of these things, or if they are, they're also doing it because they were probably also raised to accept this behavior based on bad environments that they grew up in. And I know that from personal experience because I have dated women who have said that, oh, I'm treating them so well, they're not used to it because they grew up in environments where they were cursed at, abused, or talked to in a certain way, or where the dad didn't really give them father-daughter time and just didn't care about them. And unfortunately, what we grow up around, for better or for worse, is going to influence how we think the world should best function in order for us to get what we want. And so a lot of guys, when they grow up in toxic environments, they take that toxic behavior and say, well, again, my parents stayed together, and despite what my dad's behavior was, therefore, this must be how I function. And there can be a real clash when you get into a relationship, for example, with somebody, and you came from a very sarcastic environment. And so you're getting on her and you're just constantly throwing little jabs at her here and there and trying to hit her all the time. And she starts losing interest and you're wondering what's going on. And you're unaware that this is consistently happening with every woman you date. Every woman you date, you're being overly sarcastic. Or every woman you date, you're constantly suddenly too busy to see her because you're too busy trying to make money to be able to take her out, to show her that you care for her. And it's like, it's not translating to like actually spending time with her that might be more effective in getting her to solidify her feelings and want to be with you long term, okay? And it's really hard to be mindful of that when you're growing up in it. Like when you're growing up in these toxic, when you're growing up seeing these toxic relationships rather, it can be hard to even notice that they're toxic relationships. But you need to really look at where you're at right now. Look at where you're at in terms of your dating journey, your relationship journey, the kind of girls that you've dated and the kind of girls that have possibly dumped you. What were the situations that led to her dumping you? Whether it was like, oh, you're being too abusive to me, you're saying too many mean, sarcastic things to me, I don't like the way that you're talking to me, we don't spend enough time together because you're always working. What were those things? And they may be things that you thought, based on your observation growing up as a kid, were perfectly okay and that a woman would accept, and it actually isn't. Because the reality is, most women that you meet that you have an initial attraction to are going to probably be different in terms of their character traits than whoever you grew up around or what you saw that worked in your home. Because even though it was quote unquote working in your home, that does not mean that it was healthy, okay? And as you get older, you'll find that if you really, really pay attention, you'll start to think back and be like, hey, so my dad used to do this with my mom, and looking back and realizing it and doing some research, this might not have been the best thing. Like, why do I feel most comfortable doing these kinds of actions or things when I know they're not helpful? Every woman that I do this to is not resulting in her wanting to stay with me long term. So maybe it's something about how I'm viewing relationships that's not working. And I know for myself, I grew up around very, very positive situation. Like, unfortunately, my dad died when I was 9, but just observing up to that age, I was able to see my dad, romance my mom and, take her out for, dinners and stuff. And he would have us go to the store for like holidays and buy her stuff and say, hey, this is how you treat a woman. This is how you respect her. I never, ever saw my dad ever yell at my mom. And so just the small amount of time that I was able to spend, I was able to see, oh, this must be what a relationship is like. And I believe it's been in a positive realm. Unfortunately for me, I found that like early on in my dating life, I was trying to overly romance and do those things with women that I was not in a relationship with yet, which I realized later on, oh, so this is an example of a positive relationship, but I saw my dad do a lot of relationship stuff, but I never got to see him during the dating phase of things. So this isn't actually a good thing to be doing during the dating phase. I need to figure out what I need to be doing during the dating part of things that's going to be more beneficial. And then once I get into a situation where I'm in a relationship, then these things that I observed from my parents will be great. But even in my situation where I saw positive stuff, I was seeing positive stuff at the wrong time for when it needs to be done during the courting process. And that could be another thing too, whereby you're a nice guy that's wanting to do positive things, but you're over asserting yourself and you're doing too much, and it's starting to feel more like pressure to the woman versus feeling like a situation where it's more of a natural flow of things and she's coming to you asking for relationship type things, okay? So all that to be said is that we always have things we could be learning about what works effectively in a relationship. And especially as you're going from person to person, each person's going to have their own idea of what works best for them. And yes, you will find that there are women out there that also grew up in negative environments and have negative ideas about what a relationship should be. They have a negative idea of what masculinity should be. And you're going to run into those women as well. And you can't necessarily change those women, but you can change how you operate in relationships so that way you're in a healthier place for when you do meet that right person that does gel with you, that you're not going to suddenly start doing things that mess it up based on past blueprints that you saw that actually were not positive blueprints to follow at all in the first place. Now that you've heard from me, I'd like to hear from you. What toxic relationship patterns have you noticed about yourself that you had to change? If you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment down below or write to me at HarryWilmington@gmail.com. Are you ready to learn killer icebreakers that attract women on dating apps? Go to introvertdatingsuccess.com right now to watch my free video training, How to Get Attractive, Feminine, Emotionally Stable Women Dying to Respond to Your First Messages on Dating Apps Without Using Sleazy Pickup Lines, which will give you the key secrets to sparking attraction and conversation with women online the smart way. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and comment on this episode and catch new episodes 7 days a week right here on YouTube or wherever podcasts can be found. In the meantime, be sure to check out my other episodes so you too can learn how to date as your introverted self while still getting your precious alone time. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.